you have ever taken care of a crying baby, you know sometimes there are just things that you will do to make the baby happy. You can hold the baby, rock the baby, make the baby feel better, perhaps offer it some food. These are forms of pacifying the baby in order to bring about good behavior. Now, spanking may come to mind. However, spanking usually as a punishment isn't going to make the baby better. It will probably just make the situation worse. Pacifying a baby, or appeasement, is essentially a way to take bad behavior and give good behavior in order to bring about more good behavior. But what if your baby has a little mustache? Hi everyone, this is Mr. Trio, and today we are looking at why had international peace collapsed by 1939? Appeasement. Appeasement is our fourth focus point. Was the policy of appeasement justified? In our previous videos, we have taken a look at a number of foreign policy decisions that Hitler makes in the 1930s. In the 1930s, Britain, in particular, allows many of these actions to take place because they want to avoid any open conflict with the Nazi regime. These appeasements all come to a head by 1939. But before we jump ahead, it's important to take a few minutes to recognize that appeasement with Germany did make sense at the time. It's very easy to criticize appeasement in 2018 because we're looking back in history. But in 1930s, why did Great Britain tolerate appeasement with Nazi Germany? There are a number of reasons. First, many people in Britain believed that Germany had been put in a harsh condition during the Treaty of Versailles, and appeasement was a way to correct some of these problems. It's also important to recognize that Italy and Japan were also some troublemakers in the 1930s, and many people in Britain perceived that they were a bigger threat than Nazi Germany was. It's not unimportant to remember that appeasement was very popular. When Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain came back from Munich and told everyone that we had peace in our time, people thought that's a good thing. We're avoiding war. Who wants to go to another war? So it was very popular with the British people. Last but not least, the other great threat that many people in Britain saw was communism. Hitler had supported fascist governments in Spain against communists, and they recognized that Germany was on the border with the Soviet Union and essentially was keeping the Soviet Union at bay in the 1930s. So Germany could be potentially an ally, not an enemy, against communism. But all of that changes in March of 1939 when the Nazi regime invades Czechoslovakia. As a reminder, Czechoslovakia had been formed after World War I, mainly from provinces of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. Let's consider two photographs. One, when the Nazis took Austria and marched into Vienna, its capital, in 1938, and when the Nazis arrived in Prague in 1939. Now, obviously, these two photographs are cherry-picked, and one clearly shows the excitement and one doesn't. However, in 1938, Hitler could justify why he wanted Austria to be a part of the Nazi regime. In some ways, it followed the idea that old Woodrow Wilson had said many years before, that the idea of self-determination meant that people of the same race should rule themselves, and Austrians are Germanic people. But the same cannot be justified in Czechoslovakia. In Czechoslovakia, there were Czech people, there were Slovak people, Hungarians, and some Germans. So essentially, this was not consistent with the policies that the Nazis had had before. Many people believe that in 1939, with the invasion of Czechoslovakia, Hitler was finally showing his hand, what his foreign policy was meant to accomplish. And the big card he had not played yet was Poland. Poland will become the focus of March of 1939 because Hitler wants it. Poland also had been recreated at the end of World War I from territory from Germany, and Hitler in 1939 begins to talk about a number of items, wanting Poland back. In some ways, it is at this point that Britain and also France essentially draw a red line and say, enough is enough. No more appeasement. You cannot have Poland, in other words. And if Hitler crosses that line, there will be war. Britain and France in 1939 make the commitment that if Poland is invaded, they will react. Essentially, this is the point that goes too far. We'll talk about this more in our next video. So thanks for joining me on this short episode of Appeasement. We'll talk more in class. See you later.